This is the end of my first session, and I will get back shortly with the second session where we'll introduce broad trends for smart ports. Thank you very much. Welcome back to part 2. Part 2 is going to be about broad trends for smart ports. So we'll see in theory and in practice what are the major trends for smart ports. So smart ports are really part of a bigger trend, which is the fourth industrial revolution, which is what has been defined by the World Economic Forum since broadly 2010, and is a process of digitizing business. So since the 1800s, world has undergone several revolutions. The first one was mechanization, so mechanical manufacturing. From 1900, it started the mass production. So from manufacturing perspective, we have seen the production of large volume produced in mass through assembly lines. Since 1980s, the world has experienced the process of globalization, globalization of services and products. And since 2010, as defined by the World Economic Forum, the world is undergoing a fourth industrial revolution, which pretty much involves digitizing products and services. In particular, digitization means the application of smart technology to businesses and produce a smart ecosystem. For example, some of the technologies that are used in the fourth industrial revolution and in smart ports are Internet of Things, hyperconnectivity, big data, but as well as 3D printing, virtual reality, autonomous transportation, and so on. So ports have a key role to play in the digital transformation of Industry 4.0 and in connecting supply chains. So overall, there is 5 major trends which are involved in digital transformation trends, namely energy and environment, digitalization, automation, new business models, and security. So I know we touched already quite a few of them, but I'd like to go a bit deeper for each of those. The first one is digitization, which is a very broad trend actually. So it refers to the process of digitizing products and services within a specific industry. Some of the world's biggest ports, however, have begun to develop a more efficient strategy based on the principle of digitizing and managing information. Information is a very important asset that can lead to major efficiency gains if processed and managed properly. We know that bureaucracy and all the paperwork involved in the shipping industry can slow down processes. So the idea of having information in real time, that's a very important aspect for port operation today. So what are some examples of informations for ports? Well, we can see information pretty much everywhere within a port system. We can see information coming from loading and unloading containers. We can see information coming from monitoring of measuring of emissions within the port area. As we said at the beginning, we can collect data of emissions coming from air emissions, coming from waste, coming from noise, coming from even outside the port area. But also we can have information with regard to vehicles coming inside and outside the port area. So we can immediately know from reading a plate of a truck coming in the port what is the content of the container it's carrying. Where is the container going? How long should the container be stored in the terminal area? And so on. And as well as monitoring, for example, the dock space. Particularly, I think it's one of the most difficult and complex activities within port is found within the terminal. So the storage and the inflow and outflow of containers, it's quite complex. So there is a lot of information that can be retrieved from such operations. The second one is automation and robotization. So when we look at automation processes within the port, we know that several ports worldwide have started to automate their processes, particularly within terminals, so with automated equipment, automated cranes, not quite yet automated autonomous vehicles, but it's certainly something that is coming. As new components of this process, the emergence of new technologies like 5G and the industrial Internet of Things promises to play a key role in generating information and automating ports through the development of cyber-physical systems. When included in the digitization process, automation and robotization can directly contribute to efficiency gains in most logistics and port processes. I've also added here a figure on the use of automated robots within businesses at the country level. As you can see, the Republic of Korea is by far the leading country in the use of robots in logistics system, in particular warehouse as well as port system. The port of Busan has got also quite a few of automated entry cranes and automated terminal operations. There is also the need for new business models. That's a big trend. So correctly digitizing and automating ports will open the door to a wide range of new business models based on using technology to share information and resources. The emergence of technologies like blockchain, for example, promises to be a key factor in decentralizing transportation and logistics information flows, preparing the ground for new models where port managers and customers create added value. So the rise of, for example, of blockchain technology is very important in ports, but more generally in the shipping industry with regard to documents, bill of lading, mate receipt, commercial invoices, insurances. If this sort of all paperwork and documents is digitized via blockchain and stored, for example, in one cloud operated by a port community system, that very much would speed up all port operations. So a new model will boost performance and profits and reduce cost, greenhouse gas emission, and workflow congestion. So this is how a new business model need to be looked upon. The use of smart technology to be faster, to be greener, to be more agile, to be more resilient as well. The fourth one is, once again, security. As we are saying, a smart port will face certainly an increasingly higher risk of both physical but as well as digital attacks compared to traditional ports, for example. As commercial activities expand and the amount of data and information exchange of ports will also increase. So there will be, really the business is going to be more on the data and the data that each port will be able to process. Cybersecurity systems must therefore guarantee quick and efficient protection for any type of data related to workers and systems. The systems will incorporate different complementary mechanisms like digital signature and certificates, public and private keys, encryption and authentication system, and virtual private networks. The energy and environment. So again, we are coming back to the sustainability topic within ports. One of the main aims of the port technology revolution is to reduce energy consumption and lessen environmental impacts. And on the left, I have taken this figure from ESPO, which stands for European Seaport Organization. This is produced on a yearly basis, and it's an environmental report with regard to the environmental priorities of European ports. As you can see, for example, these priorities have changed over time. But for 2020, the number one priority is air quality. The second one is climate change. So how can ports prepare to climate change? Number three is energy efficiency. Number four is noise, and so on. So these top four priorities, if the port is able and willing to reduce them, the smart technology will immensely help in decreasing such negative impact of ports. So, for example, the shift to automated electricity-based equipment or use of alternative fuels will certainly lower emission levels. Automation of processes, of course, coupled with alternative fuels like biofuels or like LNG or the electrification very much of port equipment might really give a big push to greening processes within the ports. There is other alternative source of power like solar panels and so on, which are being used by some ports. At the same time, however, ports will implement different systems for monitoring, energy management, and the control of different air pollutants, as well as the traffic management system. So the important thing when it comes to energy and environment is really to install sensors, cameras, which can monitor on real time the emission levels of the port and improve KPIs. Number four is main technology in smart ports, and this is more the practical side of the technologies that are implemented in smart ports. So here I will hopefully provide an interesting insight of what are the main technologies used in smart ports. As we will see, there is quite a few of them. The first one is Internet of Things, or IoT. The definition for IoT, which stands for Internet of Things, is a term used to describe the process of connecting any objects to the internet. So the Internet of Things is nothing new. Today we're seeing IoT very much used in cars. How can we connect our cell phone, for example, to the radio system and to the phone system of the car? But even more in households. So how we connect our smartphone with the laundry machine, with the refrigerator, with our TV, for example, very much, even with our blinders or with our robotic vacuum cleaner. So IoT is something that is relatively new, very much being applied in several businesses, and is also being applied to ports activities. So the Internet of Things in general refers to machine-to-machine, M2M, technology enabled by secure network connectivity and cloud infrastructure to reliably transform data into useful information for people, businesses, and institutions. So this is more a function of IoT in general terms. How about Internet of Things in ports? So we know that the main port activity is really to move cargo from land and sea. So to act as an interface of adding value to cargo coming from sea and inland as well. So what is the opportunity is? The opportunity for ports is to increase the use of Internet of Things in order to gain the ability to acquire data from the movements of goods and use of the infrastructure. So as we were saying, IoT is a machine-to-machine enabled technology. In this case, we can really connect different technologies using the port, for example, gantry cranes, sensors using the berth to measure water levels, sensors used to monitor once again emission levels. We can use cameras, smart cameras and sensor at the gate to be aware of how many tracks and how many containers are coming in and out of the port. So there is a lot of use to connect these different technological devices really to gather information and gain insight of port operations. So the application of IoT in ports are wide, as we were saying. And here there is a figure that sort of summarizes quickly some examples. They are not limited to only these examples, but I think they can be quite insightful. For example, IoT in ports can be monitoring real-time water quality, temperature, and measurement. And that's very important. We can measure water quality. We can measure even currents. We can measure the water level if there is tides in the port area. For example, if there is leisure boat within the port, we can track movements. We can track really real time all the movement of leisure boats. We can, more importantly, from a commercial perspective, for example, we can track and monitor the quality of shipping conditions worldwide. So we can even collect data from ships coming within the port area. Very importantly for container terminals, items location tracking and environmental monitoring. Once again, we can track the status of the cargo. We know how long the cargo is going to stay in the port, and we know when the cargo is due to exit the port area, for example, but as well as emission levels within the terminal. We can have, for example, asset geofencing, virtual perimeter control. We have vehicle diagnostic and smart parking. So, for example, we know when it comes to repair and maintenance of vehicles, we know where vehicles are due within the parking as well of the port. Vehicle tracking and prevention maintenance in general of the equipment of the port. Another example is given by remote asset monitoring and control, for example, of wind farms, if any. So these are a few examples of IoT application in ports. Even more on port operation of IoT, what are some of the elements that are involved? The first element is the exploitation of connectivity. So 5G will be the enabler of connecting such devices to, for example, essential database. So data, in this case, is gathered and passes through networks to the IT backend cloud. So data is really gathered in a cloud where later is going to be processed. And the second element for ports, which is extremely important, is the analytical part. So through manual analysis, but more importantly through automated processing, insights are extracted and preserved or alerted to the corresponding people and enterprises. So the first idea is collecting data. The second idea is to gather insight from this data through big data analytics. And the service is really to provide insightful information. So insightful information very much means for the people or for the company using it, how can we improve a specific process? For example, if one day the port is experiencing heavy congestion, we collect data, how can we sort of relieve actually such congestion. This could be at sea, this could be in the port area. Or how can we sort of free space in the yard? How can we move containers in and out more effectively? So ports and container terminals have started to deploy sensors in cranes, in container handling equipment, in containers, in trucks, but more generally in vehicles, and at gates to enable specific processes. The number one is better management of existing infrastructure. So a smart port with data to better understand port activity. So this is more generally, how can we improve port processes? The second one is reduce traffic-related emissions. So how can we, for example, synchronize the arrival of ships and cargo in terminals? So we actually, via smart data, we are able to sort of optimize processes of ships coming in and outside the port area. Also schedule and accredit vehicles. Again, sometimes we have congestion inland. There is too many trucks waiting to load containers in the port. We can certainly improve such processes. We can also optimize multi-modal operation. So we can establish an intelligent infrastructure, and we can support port stakeholders in developing, deploying, and validating new business model in the information economy. Ports need to expand the use of Internet of Things to support user requirements. The first one is data visibility and data analytics. As we were saying, this is a very important time, and that's important to support decision makings of managers within companies operating in the port area. The second one is real-time analytics. Real-time data on the status of cargo, paperwork, and availability of port facilities. However, there is several challenges that remain to be addressed with the implementation of IoT. Number one is investment of the Internet of Things. Not all actors are doing it. So whilst the port authority in developed country might have the capabilities and the willingness to implement Internet of Things, maybe some terminal operators are not that willing or to invest money, and are not willing, once again, to cooperate with public organization. Another issue which is also quite important, as we know that the technology is not that widespread yet for port logistics, is the interoperability. So there is a lot of platforms available, there is a lot of Internet of Things provider, and there is a lot of protocols. So how can we make sure that the port authority and different organizations implement the same platform, the same provider, and the same protocol? They need to agree on that. The third one is, again, is the privacy of information and the security of the information. And that's, I think, one very important element, as we know that some private operation might not very much willing to share sensitive information of the company with others. So I think that's the big issue that need to be addressed. And the second one, of course, is security, as we were saying. Are we sure that cyber attacks will not occur? And if they occur, are we prepared for fighting back or not? And the fourth one is that there is also a high dependence on infrastructure for data and communication to do absolutely everything. And that's another major issue. One good example of a port which is using Internet of Things is once again given by the Port of Singapore. And the Port of Singapore is partnering with a Finnish group known as Wärtsilä. Wärtsilä is actually a maritime engine maker, a ship engine maker. It's a world leader in producing engine for ships, 2-strokes and 4-strokes engines. And they're partnered up to develop a cyber physical security and intelligent port operation in combination with maritime tech startups and higher education institutes. As you can see, the Port of Singapore is able to do that because, as we were saying in the first session, they created an innovation ecosystem. So it's not only the commercial port, but there is research and development, there is education institutes, there is startups, which some of them are very successful these days. And even more, they are cooperating with IT or maritime-related organization to be able to successfully implement Internet of Things in ports. MPA is also developing a maritime, Singapore Maritime Data Hub, known as SGMDH, as a one-stop data repository with a centralized application interface gateway and data management capabilities. So as the Port of Hamburg, which is cooperating with Cisco IT company, in the same way, the Port of Singapore is also cooperating with the data company in order to make sure that the software capabilities and cloud information is properly implemented. So a few examples of IoT in the Port of Singapore. One, again, very important idea behind the Internet of Things are sensors. Sensors are, again, devices that are able to collect data, a variety of data from port operations. So sensors are important to provide real-time data collection for current, speed, and direction in Singapore. So in this case, the Port of Singapore is monitoring weather conditions and as well as ship approaching the port area with regard to speed and direction to avoid accident within the port area. And the idea here is to increase the safety of navigation and port operation. So at the beginning we were talking about oil spills, for example. So sometimes very big container ports and port in general face congestion where lots of ships are approaching anchorage at the same time, and that increases the likelihood of collisions, of accidents. So by monitoring the status, the speed, and the location of ships via sensor, then the Port of Singapore is able to increase the safety of navigation within their ports. Again, another example for IoT applications ports is given by the Port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. So in this case, Watson IoT system and Kinetic IoT platform, respectively, are partnered to improve data processing and intelligence at the network edge. So once again, also Rotterdam is not, the Port of Rotterdam as such is not capable to fully and effectively implement Internet of Things, but they need to partner up with IT companies, in this case Watson and Kinetic IT platforms. And the Port of Rotterdam is particularly keen to collect environmental data at the port. What data? Well, they focus very much on wind, visibility, and tidal information to discern the optimal conditions and timing for the berthing and passage of ships. So pretty much similar to what the Port of Singapore is doing. The Port of Rotterdam is also is aiming to improve the navigational safety. So including wind, for example, data, the visibility. Usually the Port of Rotterdam is subject to fog in particular days And we all know that when there is foggy conditions, pilotage and tug operations become mandatory. That's the same in the port of Busan, for example. So by monitoring this data, tidal information as well, we are able not only to increase the safety of operation within the port area, but we're also able to optimize the timing in which a ship can berth and can start loading or discharging operations. There is also a new project that is developed by the Port of Rotterdam, and that's about measuring changes in container parameters like vibration, the slope, the position, the sound, local air pollution, humidity, and temperature. And I think that's a very interesting one. If we think, for example, on specific cargo being transported in containers, for example, coffee, or for example, anything that comes in reefer containers, like meat or seafood, vegetable, fruit, whatever, we know that the humidity and temperature level are extremely important. Otherwise, the cargo might spoil. So this new project developed by the Port of Rotterdam is really taking a step forward with regard to the cargo tracking and the cargo status inside containers. And they are immediately aware if temperature or humidity levels are changed inside the containers. So the containers will also might be fitted with solar panels, which can be used to determine how much power a container can generate during a given journey by ship, train, or truck. So this is a new idea on how to sort of become greener and get the container to produce its own power, for example, for reefer containers. And the third example of IoT application in ports is given again by the Port of Hamburg. And here there is a very interesting initiative taken by the Port of Hamburg. The Port Authority of Hamburg green-lighted a project to test Tesla founder Elon Musk's futuristic Hyperloop System for transporting shipping container at 1,000 kilometers per hour in a part vacuum tube between the quayside and the container yard. So there is quite a few videos about this project called Hyperloop System, and it's not only for cargo, but it's also for train passengers. But there is quite a few applications in which this system is being tested in the Port of Hamburg. So the system is a sort of vacuum where containers can move extremely quickly. That could change the logistics flow and the transportation system in the near future. This is only a test level. There is no implementation yet. So taking data from shipments in and out of Hamburg on sea, road, and rail, and informing all relevant stakeholders. So pretty much as other ports are doing, the idea is to collect data of all cargoes coming in and outside the port and give real information the Port Authority. The Port of Hamburg is also testing 5G enabled applications. So 5G is the technology that is enabling IoT. And in this case, the Port of Hamburg has partnered with Deutsche Telekom, which is the national telecommunication company in Germany. And the project at Hamburg port area has lasted for a year. The key applications are connected shipping, remote control of traffic light, and augmented reality. So the IoT application in this case are extending beyond the purely gathering of data information, but is extending also to traffic lights in the city and augmented reality for port workers. We come back to augmented reality very shortly. The Port of Los Angeles is also one example from the North American continent of a leading container port when it comes to IoT applications. The Port of LA launched a shared data portal called Port Optimizer with GE's transportation business. And the idea here is to give cargo owners, shipping lines, terminal operators, and every other wharf-side players, so terminal operators pretty much, a way to manage and plan their interaction with the port. So the idea is to sort of form a port community system, so a single platform where all actors can interact with the port, with stakeholders, and particularly with the Port Authority. And the Port of Los Angeles has also implemented sensors to collect environmental data.